Archaeologists have uncovered the remains of the oldest known church in Armenia dating back to the 4th century. The octagonal building was unearthed during an excavation in the ancient city of Artaxata.
The ground never lies. We might lose books, burn scrolls, and forget legends, but the earth keeps a perfect record of everything we try to hide. For over a century, farmers grazed their sheep on top of an empire, unaware of what lay beneath their feet.
Christian archaeology is a weapon of faith in the arsenal of proving to this modern scientific world that the stories in the Bible are real.
But when modern technology finally peeled back the layers of clay, it revealed a structure that defies explanation. It is an octagonal masterpiece identical to the most sacred sites in Jerusalem, yet it sits thousands of miles away. This discovery isn't just a ruin, it is a smoking gun in a 2,000-year-old mystery. The Octagon of the Apocalypse. Christian archaeology is a weapon of faith in the arsenal of proving to this modern scientific world that the stories in the Bible are real. Most people think the timeline of history is set in stone, but beneath the red dust of Armenia, a team of researchers just hit something that shouldn't be there. It wasn't just a wall or a pot, it was an octagonal shape hidden for 1,700 years. This structure predates almost everything we know about official Christianity. The sensors screamed that something massive was buried under the ancient city of Artaxata. When they finally broke ground, they didn't just find a building, they found a link to a past that was supposed to be erased, the shape that shouldn't be there. The ground does not lie. We might lose books, burn scrolls, and forget legends, but the earth keeps a perfect record of everything we try to hide. For over a century, the ancient city of Artaxata was just a footnote for most people. It was a ruin in the shadow of the biblical Mount Ararat, a place where the wind howled over empty fields. But a team from the University of Munster decided to look deeper. They weren't using shovels, at least not at first. They were using magnetic perspection. Basically, they were X-raying the floor of the valley. They expected to find the usual things, maybe some old Roman walls or the outline of a simple house. That is what you usually find in these digs. But here's the catch. The data that came back didn't look like a house, it looked like a message. On the screen, a distinct shape emerged from the noise. It was huge. It measured about 100 feet across, but it was the geometry that made the blood run cold in the veins of the archaeologists. It wasn't a square or a rectangle. It was an octagon. A perfect 8-sided structure with cross-shaped extensions jutting out from the sides. In the ancient world, you didn't just build octagons for fun. That shape meant something very specific. It was reserved for the most sacred monuments of the time. It is the same shape used for the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, the place where tradition says Jesus was buried. Finding this shape here, thousands of miles away in the rugged terrain of Armenia, was like finding a key to a lock we didn't know existed. The technology they used to find this is fascinating in itself. Magnetic perspection works by detecting tiny anomalies in the Earth's magnetic field. When humans disturb the soil by digging a ditch or burning a fire, it changes the magnetic signature of that dirt forever. It is like a fingerprint that never fades. The team led by Professor Achim Lichtenberger and Dr. Torben Schreiber realized they were standing on top of the oldest archaeologically documented church in the entire country. And remember, Armenia isn't just any country. It was the first nation in history to adopt Christianity as its official religion. They did it in the year 301. That is more than a decade before the Roman Empire stopped hunting Christians down. This building dates back to the 4th century. That puts it right at the explosive beginning of this massive cultural shift. The floor was paved with terracotta tiles. The walls were thick and the platforms were made of mortar. This was not a temporary shack. This was a cathedral of power. But the shape, the octagon, implies something else. In ancient architecture, the octagon is often called the intermediate shape. The square represents the earth. The circle represents the heavens. The octagon is the bridge between them. It is the shape of transition. It is the shape of resurrection. So if you build a massive octagon in the capital city of Artaxata, you are not just building a church, you are building a gateway. You are building a machine designed to move something from the earthly realm to the divine realm. But why was it here? The city of Artaxata was once a metropolis. It was the capital of kings and a hub of the Silk Road. and then it was gone. The church was destroyed, buried under feet of mud, hidden from the eyes of thieves and historians alike. When the team finally verified the magnetic data, they confirmed the impossible. They had found a physical link to the days of Gregory the Illuminator, the man who converted the king and changed the fate of the region. But finding the building was just the start, because when you find a structure designed to hold a mystery, you have to ask yourself what it was protecting. But to understand why this shape terrified the ancients, we have to look at the blueprint of the divine. The king who became a beast. An octagon is a vault. It is a container, and the things buried in our taxata might just rewrite the story we have been telling ourselves for 2,000 years. Here is where the theories start to get wild. Some researchers speculate that the specific alignment of this octagon isn't just about Jerusalem. They believe it might align with other ancient sites, creating a sort of grid of power. If you look at the placement of the Holy Sepulchre, the Church of the Nativity, and now this discovery in Artaxata, they form a specific geometric pattern across the Middle East. Was this building placed here to tap into some kind of telluric current? It sounds crazy, but the ancients were obsessed with location. They built where the earth felt alive, and right next to this site is Mount Ararat, the legendary resting place of Noah's Ark. If you were going to build a vault to hold the most important secrets of the New World, wouldn't you build it next to the mountain that saved humanity from the Old World? The discovery of the Octagon has opened a door that many people didn't want opened. It challenges the timeline and the geography of faith. As the team digs deeper, they are getting closer to the center. And the center of an octagon is never empty. To understand why this vault in the ground matters, you have to look at the blood-soaked history of the ground itself. It is not that simple, though. The story of Artaxata is more like a psychological horror movie. Go back to the year 300. The Roman Empire is to the west, still worshipping Jupiter. The Persian Empire is to the east, lighting fires for Zoroaster, and sandwiched in the middle is Armenia. The ruler is King Tiridates III, and by all accounts, he was a brutal, efficient warlord. The story goes that a man named Gregory came to the court. Gregory wasn't a warrior, he was a preacher. He refused to offer a sacrifice to the pagan goddess Anahit. In the ancient world, refusing the king was treason. Tiridates threw Gregory into a pit, a deep dark hole in the ground known as Khor Virap. It was infested with snakes and scorpions. It was a place designed to drive men mad. This wasn't a jail cell. It was a grave with the lid left open. Gregory survived in that pit for 14 years. How does a human being survive 14 years in a snake pit without sunlight? The official story says a woman threw him bread every day. But let's look at the wilder theory. What if Gregory didn't just sit in the dark? What if the pit of Khor Virap was actually an entrance to something else? Some theorists suggest that during those 14 years, Gregory discovered something beneath the earth. Maybe he found an ancient archive, a pre-flood vault, or a source of knowledge that gave him the power to survive. While Gregory was in the hole, King Tiridates lost his mind. The legends say he turned into a boar. Now maybe he didn't literally grow tusks, but he likely suffered from a severe mental breakdown, perhaps clinical lycanthropy. He was howling at the moon, running through the forests of Artaxata like a wild animal. The court was in panic. The strongest kingdom in the Caucasus was falling apart. Then the king's sister had a dream. She was told that only the prisoner in the pit could cure the king, so they dragged Gregory up from the depths. He walked up to the king, prayed, and the madness lifted. Tiridates was healed, and in a moment of absolute clarity, he declared that Armenia would no longer worship the old gods. They would follow Gregory's God. In 301, Armenia became the first Christian state in the world. This is where the discovery of the Octagon comes in. The church found by the German-Armenian team dates to this exact period. It corresponds to the lifetime of Gregory and Tiridates. However, the real horror story began long before the first brick was laid. The architecture of resurrection. The location in Artaxata suggests this was ground zero for the new order. The marble pieces found at the site were imported from the Mediterranean. Think about the cost of hauling heavy marble slabs over mountains in the 4th century. You do that for a monument that is supposed to last forever. But here is the twist. This church was built right on top of the old pagan infrastructure. The archaeologists found evidence that the church was constructed to physically crush the past beneath its weight. It was a dominance move. It was a way of sealing the old gods underground. But what if it was also a way of sealing what Gregory found? The octagon is a shape of containment. If the king had been possessed by a madness and Gregory had cured him, maybe they built this structure to ensure that whatever caused the madness never came back. We know that ancient cultures used geometric shapes to trap entities. Is it possible that the Church of Artaxata isn't just a place of worship, but a spiritual prison? And then there is the matter of the texts. Gregory the Illuminator brought a doctrine, but the Christianity of the 4th century wasn't the polished version we have today. It was wild and full of heretical ideas. If Gregory had access to texts that were later banned by Rome, where would he hide them? He would bury them beneath the most important church in the kingdom, protected by the king he saved. The destruction of the city centuries later might have been the best thing that ever happened to those secrets. It sealed them in. The University of Munster team is now standing on top of this legacy. Every layer they remove brings us closer to understanding what really happened between the king and the saint. The octagon was built to guard a terrifying secret hidden in plain sight. Yeah, about that shape. We need to talk about why the octagon is the smoking gun of this entire discovery. In modern architecture, we build things to be functional, but in the 4th century, every shape was a code. The number 8 was symbolic. It represented the 8th day, the day of resurrection. Building an 8-sided structure was a theological weapon. It was a way of saying this place is a portal to the next world. When the University of Munster team analyzed the layout, they realized it had a diameter of roughly 100 feet. That is massive. The most famous octagonal buildings of the ancient world are the Golden Octagon in Antioch and the Rotunda in Jerusalem. By building this in Artaxata, the Armenian kings were saying, "We are the new Jerusalem." But get this, the octagonal shape is also highly practical for guarding a central point. The focus wasn't a stage at the front, it was the floor in the middle. The team found remains of the terracotta floor. But what is missing is just as important as what is there. The center of these structures often contained a crypt or a vault. The Knights Templars centuries later were obsessed with octagonal structures. They built their churches in this shape because they believed it held the key to sacred geometry, a way of tapping into the divine frequencies of the universe. Some French historians suggest that the octagon is actually a containment field for the Ark of the Covenant. The Bible says the Ark was lost. Armenian tradition says the Ark of Noah is right next door on the mountain. What if the relics of the old world were brought down from the mountain and stored here? Artaxata was the closest major city to the landing site of the Ark. If you found something on that mountain, you would bring it to your capital. You would build a massive, impenetrable vault around it, and you would shape that vault to contain its power. If you believe that history is stranger than fiction and want to keep digging into the truth with us, hit that like button and subscribe. Are we looking at the ruins of a church, or are we staring at the lid of Pandora's box waiting to be fully opened?